Hi guys, this is Jim from M&M Tools and Machinery. We just got finished doing a review on this Laguna, and that we said we'd look at doing on how to set your bandsaw properly. But I'm going to show you the way that I was taught. I think it's been a good way for me thus far, but certainly take a look on YouTube and online, and there's lots of other options too. Okay, so first thing, the anatomy of the blade. This, in between these 2 points, is called the gullet, okay? It goes down and comes up. That's the gullet. When you're setting the side guides, you want them at the gullet or a little bit back, but don't push them any further forward. If you look down on that blade, just barely, you can kind of see it. There's what's called set. There's a set in the teeth, which means the teeth are this set up like that. They're done like that on purpose so that as you're taking material out, it creates a gap so the blade doesn't get just stuck in the wood, okay? So you want to leave the set in there. If you set your guides too close, either you mess up and ruin your guides or you mess up and ruin your blades. And on top of that, it doesn't cut like it should, and so then you end up hating it. So you want to set it at the bottom of the gullet or a little further back, okay? So first thing you do when you come in to set up your bandsaw is you come in and you're going to take, assuming that we had a blade in here, and we can show you on some of these other saws too, setting up ceramic guides, cool blocks, bearing guides, all is the same, okay? There's a few things on the market that are different, like the Carter stabilizer, but they have directions on that. Bearings are a great way to go. They're an improvement over cool blocks. Actually, that's not true. On some things, cool blocks are better, but for general use, bearings tend to be better than cool blocks, and then ceramic, of course, is better than bearings. But it's all the same concept for any of them, okay? So we'll kind of show you out here since we've already pulled the Laguna out. Okay, so first thing you do when you come in is you take your guides all the way away from the blade, Imagine that your blade is in there, okay? So you'd pull your guides all the way away on both the top and the bottom. So at this point, your guides are not touching the blade at all. You're going to make sure it's tracking properly. Tracking means that it's in the center of the tire or center of the wheel, okay? Once you know it's tracking properly, now we're going to go to setting the guides, okay? We're not turning on the saw at any point here. So to make sure a bandsaw blade tracks, you put it on there, and then you're going to spin the wheel, right, with the blade on, and just watch the blade's movement. If it starts to hug one side, then you need to stop and tweak it more in and out to make sure that it tracks properly, okay? So remember, we're taking the guides all the way away from the blade. We're tracking the blade, but before you can do that, before you put on the blade, you're going to move the guides out, and then you're going to put the blade on, and you're going to make sure that your tension is off, okay? So kind of as a guide, if you're putting on a 3/4 inch blade, you don't necessarily have to take the tension all the way down, but you need to take the tension down far enough where you can get the blade on. Okay, so you're going to take the tension off, you're going to make sure the guides aren't touching, and then you're going to put your blade on, and you'll just add a little bit of tension to it so it's on there, and then make sure the blade tracks. And what you're doing is you're watching to make sure that the blade is in the center of the wheel, okay? Once you get it close to tracking, this again is how I do it. I'm sure there's other ways. Once you get it close to tracking, now I personally will put the tension all the way on, and then I'll again turn this a little bit to make sure it's tracking in the center of the wheel, okay? Once I know it's tracking in the center, then I know that my adjustments here are done, okay? So I've got the tension set, I've got this set. So now what I do is I come down here, and again, the saw is unplugged from the wall, it's off. This is all just done by hand, okay? So it's safe. Then what I do is I come in here, and now my blade's running in between the two, and I'm going to come and set my guides. So on the back, what I do is I just pull the back away, because you want to remember that your back is your thrust bearing, okay? So that means it's there when there's pressure put on the blade, not all, So when it's running normally, yeah, the bearing, or it might be touching the guide, or the bearing might be spinning, but there's not a lot of pressure on it. Once there's pressure on the saw, then your thrust bearing is there to help. So we're going to show you on this jet. This guide was too far back. It was like there, okay? Now you see we're way off. I don't know if you can see that very well, but we're way off where we need to be on the gullet. So what we're gonna do is bring these up, not worrying about the thrust bearing again. We're gonna bring these up to about the back. See how that we're just a little bit behind the gullet, okay? So, and then we're gonna lock that in. So it moved a little on us, that's okay. We're now gonna lock that into place. And I don't know if you guys saw that, but watch this. When I come up, watch how the blade moves forward a little. So that basically means that this guide over here on this side is touching. We don't want that, remember? We don't want it touching at all, okay? So now, once we've got that set, then you take a piece of paper, okay? And you're gonna bring a piece of paper in here, that's loosened, and you're just gonna move the guide into where it's touching the blade. Right? But I want to be able to move the piece of paper freely. Like that's too tight. Too tight. It's pretty good. And I don't want, when I say that, I don't mean like the roller's allowing me to move it. I mean I can move the paper freely, okay? What we're trying to do in essence is you don't want to be pushing over on the blade on this side and then compensating for that on this side. You want the blade to be where it is and the guides support the blade, okay? So just remember that in your mind. The blade is what it is, that's your 0 point, and then these guides support it on the sides. If you put too much pressure on one side or the other, you will never get a good cut because the odds of you setting it properly down below to what you've set it up on top are not real high, and then on top of that, your blades are always tweaked, okay? So it's just, you want to set it to where the blade's 0 and you're coming to the blade. So that's where the piece of paper comes in. The piece of paper is basically making sure that you're not setting it too hard on one side or the other, okay? And if you screw up, that's okay, you just come and reset it, okay? So now we set that one, and then we're gonna bring this one over. Okay, see how that bearing's just barely moving, okay? So that's good, right? That's a good sign. That means that we're not too tight, we're not too loose, it's just about right, okay? Now if you're a little bit looser than that, you're okay. If you're a little bit tighter, you're okay. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect. In fact, while you're cutting, you'll know, so we're gonna lock that down because we're good enough. You'll know if you're doing it wrong because the blade will be tweaked as you're cutting. So what that means is either you'll get more drift in the blade, or no matter what you do, the blade's got a kind of a funky cut to it or something like that, okay? Or you're having to push too hard, or you're building up a lot of heat. Heat is a bad sign on these blades, just like most blades, okay? So we've set those two. Now the thrust bearing, if you look at that, see how that thrust bearing, there's a big gap, okay? So we're gonna move the thrust bearing in, and again, remember, blade is 0. So I'm just setting this to where it can help the blade when necessary. So the way I was taught, and you can just use the piece of paper method on this too, by the way, but the way I was taught is kind of a by feel. So see, whenever I move the blade, the bearing's moving. So what you do is, I get it to that point and I back it off just a hair. Okay? So now the bearing still moves a little bit, but not constantly with the blade when there's no pressure on it. Okay? And again, I'm sure there's other ways of doing it and you'll see other things, but this is the way that I was taught. So, and even if you set it to where the bearing was always moving, so long as there's not a lot of pressure on it, you're okay. Again, the concept there is, if you're putting a lot of pressure on the blade, then that means the blade's coming down here and it's going over the bearing and then coming down in, okay? So unless you have the Carter stabilizer guides, that's a bad thing. On the Carter stabilizers, they actually take out the bottom guides, and so it gives your bandsaw a little more freedom. But on these guides, you're putting a lot of stress on both the guide and the blade, so it's just bad in the long run, okay? So that's essentially how you set it, okay? So to review, move guides all the way away from the blade, take the tension off, put the blade on, and then tension it a little bit to where it's staying on securely. Turn the wheel so you can see where the blade's tracking. You can see the blade's tracking in the center, okay? Once that's done, then finish your tightening to get the proper tension, and again, turn the wheel, make sure you're tracking properly. All of this is without the cord plugged in, without the saw on, and then you come and you set your guides, okay? Piece of paper's thickness away on all 3 sides. and away you go. Remember, the blade is 0 and the guides are only there for support. Don't push the blade over anyway with any of the guides unless you have the Carter stabilizer. I hope that helps. If you have questions, please let me know. Thank you for watching, and holler at us if you need us. Thank you.